Leave everything to do with the paperwork to me. After getting married, we started considering buying a home, but my husband left everything up to me. He probably disliked having his scarce time off consumed by work. On the other hand, I had a job but more free time, so I proceeded with everything as he had told me to. When I was about to finalize a property deal with the real estate agent, the agent said, "Your husband's name cannot be used for purchasing this property because his annual income is..." I was shocked to hear that. I had no idea his salary was that low. In the end, we changed the deed to my name and purchased the property. My name is Anne. I'm a 29-year-old web designer in my 7th year of this career. I quit the company I worked for right after graduation and have been freelancing since last year. Focused on my work, I never cared much about money. I've been investing my salary from my first job in stocks and building my assets. I have a husband, Mike, who is 5 years older than me. He works as a delivery driver in the transportation industry. Our meeting was something of fate. At a train station platform, he chased after me to return the wallet I had dropped without realizing. I invited him for a meal to say thanks, and our relationship grew closer and evolved into dating. Then, a year and a half ago, we happily became husband and wife. However, post-marriage, our life together was nothing like I had imagined. My husband worked long hours at a grueling company, and as a freelancer, I always had a backlog of projects. Currently, we live in an apartment under 400 square feet, but I've been thinking about moving into a house. I thought it might be a good motivation for both of our careers. Working in such a cramped space was stressful for me, so on his day off, I brought up the idea of buying a new house. "Hey Mike, don't you think it's time we bought a new house now that we're married?" He seemed surprised by my words, jumping up from where he lay on the sofa with sleepy eyes. "A house? Yeah, I think this place is getting too small for us. How about I set the conditions then?" I was surprised by his words, but he wrote his desired conditions on a nearby notepad and handed it to me. His list, including at least 4 rooms, 2 bathrooms, and a wine cellar, was quite different from what I had envisioned. "We don't need a wine cellar, and isn't 1 bathroom enough?" I replied strongly to his objection. "No, that won't do. This is about romance. Buying a house is a once-or-never-in-a-lifetime event. I won't settle for anything half-hearted." He was stubborn beyond belief. I would rather spend my time on work than on a discussion going nowhere. Eventually, I reluctantly agreed to his terms. "Then let's go to the real estate agent together next time." Suddenly, he looked annoyed. "Ah, that's fine. You can handle all that, Anne. I'm tired from work. I'll leave the rest to you." Saying that, he lay back down on the sofa and started fiddling with his mobile phone. Does this man even realize he's married? We're about to make the biggest purchase of our lives, and he's completely uncooperative. After telling me what he wanted, he satisfiedly returned to his own world. Disappointed, I sighed and said, "Then just leave me something that shows your income. There will be a review, and I need to submit it." When I said this, he replied, "You can find it in my box of valuables. Just take it yourself." He put on earphones, shutting down the conversation completely. He's not exactly a henpecked husband, but he only says what he wants and is otherwise disengaged. Honestly, he's incredibly self-centered. He used to be so kind before we got married. Picking up my wallet feels like a lie now. I muttered this, unsure if my husband heard, and headed to my room. It was that night when I noticed something was wrong with my body. After finishing work, I glanced at the calendar. Come to think of it, I haven't had my period for 2 months now. I always had severe and irregular menstrual cycles. It was not unusual to be a month late, but this was the first time it's been 2 months. Could it be? Worried, I used the pregnancy test I had bought in advance. The result was positive. I was pregnant. "Mike, I'm pregnant." My announcement left my husband frozen in front of the TV. "Seriously?" I said to my surprised husband. "Thinking about the birth and everything else, I guess we should hurry up with buying the house, so I'm going to the real estate agent tomorrow, okay?" He was still in shock. He looked incredulous, but then what my husband said next shocked me. "What if we give up on the child?" His unexpected words left me speechless. "What? Give up as in not have it? He nodded before I could finish. Yeah, that's what I mean. Why? I argued desperately. I was beginning to feel a strange disconnect between us. I mean, I never wanted kids. It just happened. I can't believe you got pregnant just from us having a bit of fun, he said with a wry smile. His words, so thoughtless, wounded me deeply. I felt like I had been hit with a hammer. And if we have a kid, we can't have fun anymore. His words sounded like a whining child, but I couldn't back down. This was a precious life growing inside me. I was determined to have this baby, and a child definitely needs a father. I had to get him to take this seriously. Looking back, I realized how mistaken my thinking was at that time. Mike, please get it together. People in their 30s around the world start families earlier than us. I'll do my best, so you have to try too. Perhaps moved by my passion, my husband reluctantly gave in. All right, it has been said. Hearing this, I felt somewhat relieved and visited the real estate agent the next day. The price will be higher than the market average with the conditions you've requested. The agent frowned as he looked at the paper where I had written our wishes. Then he handed me a sheet of paper. This is the only property that meets all advanced conditions. There was only one that matched all our criteria among several options, but even that was $700,000. The price was significantly higher due to our many conditions. But now we were expecting another family member. I couldn't bring myself to compromise. After some thought, I said, I'll purchase this property. We proceeded with the purchase process. Please fill in the necessary items on the application form. Who will be the owner? My husband. I began filling out the form, but when I got to the annual income section, my pen stopped. Wait, Mike earns $25,000? I blurted out, looking at the salary statement he had given me. We rarely talked about money in our current life. We both contributed equally to expenses and saved the rest, so I had no idea about my husband's salary. It's difficult to say, but with this amount, the application might not pass. The apologetic agent's words made me feel embarrassed. He continued, By the way, there are a couple of other customers considering this property. If you don't decide today, it might be sold out. Those words were nothing short of pressure for me. After hearing that, I felt I had to buy it today. After some hesitation, I decided to change the owner to my name. Then, I made a bold decision to pay in full. I could just cover it with the money I had saved from stock investments and the inheritance from my grandfather. I can always save more money later. The agent was initially surprised by my actions, but then handled the rest of the process efficiently. So, a month later, we moved into our dream home. Wow, this is amazing, my husband exclaimed with excitement as soon as we entered our new home. By the way, you're going to have the baby, right? Are you going back to your parents' house? He asked while unpacking. Yes, that's the plan. My hometown is Anchorage. I could have the baby here, but I feel more at ease having it at my parents' place. Okay, good luck. His words felt somewhat distant. I started to feel unsure. My anxiety grew as my husband added, I can't quit my job even after the baby is born, so you'll have to handle the childcare. You're the one who wanted to have it. What about my job? I don't care about that, he bluntly replied. Was his response to my enthusiasm just a temporary appeasement? I felt myself sinking into despair. Time just passed in our new life in the new house, and our relationship gradually grew colder. 3 weeks before the due date, with my belly growing, I went back to my hometown, and there I safely gave birth to a boy. But the baby was born with weaker lung functions, so he had to be hospitalized for observation, and I had to return to Boston alone. Before leaving, my mother said, Come back any time if you need to. Hearing that, I truly felt what motherhood meant. While at home, I talked a lot about my married life with my parents. As my heart lightened, their faces grew gloomier, and then my father's words made me think. 2 hours after boarding the plane, I arrived in Boston. I headed straight for our new house. When I got there, I saw an unfamiliar car parked in the driveway. Feeling uneasy, I cautiously opened the front door. Inside, Numerous shoes were scattered around. I heard my husband's voice from the back. "Mom, Dad, feel free to use any of the spare rooms." I realized then that his parents were in our house. Heading to the living room, I found, as expected, his whole family gathered there. His father, mother, 2 brothers, and 2 sisters, including my husband. That made 7 people. "What are you all doing here?" I shouted as I entered the living room. Everyone turned around at my voice. "Ah, you're back. Had a boy, huh?" Ignoring his question, I continued. "Why didn't you answer my calls? I tried so many times." Then Mary, his sister, chimed in. "Calm down. How's the baby? We were all looking forward to holding our first grandchild." "For now," I answered Mary's question. "He has some lung issues, so I left him in Anchorage. Why are all of you here? I heard something about rooms." The in-laws exchanged glances. Then, as if to represent them, my husband answered my question. "I was thinking this house is too big for just the 2 of us and it's hard to clean. Plus, there's childcare, so we're all going to live together. 8 of us, including my family and us. If you don't like it, you can leave." I was stunned. What was he talking about? While I was struggling with childbirth, he had let his family move in and enjoy themselves, and now he was even trying to kick me out without a word of concern. I was taken aback and stood there for a moment. Then he said again, "What's it going to be? You staying or leaving?" Looking at his indifferent face, I remembered my father's words. "Leave. Leave such a worthless husband and come back here. We can sell the house for a good amount. Sometimes letting go is an important choice." My father's words echoed in my mind. As I recalled them, the scene in front of me seemed trivial, and without realizing it, I spoke out. "It seems like there's a misunderstanding, but I came here to sell the house." My words were half true and half false. Ever since my father told me to come back home, I had been thinking about our newly bought house. Selling the house we just bought felt like a waste, but staying with my husband was becoming increasingly difficult. So I thought, why not just sell the house? I had been contemplating this, and now was undoubtedly the right moment to convey this. I wasn't being emotional. It was something that needed to be said. Understandably, my husband and his family were shocked by my words. "Wait a minute. The house is in my name, isn't it? Don't make decisions on your own." "That's right. I haven't told you yet, have I?" I replied. "Told me what?" His voice was slightly irritated. "You remember how you left everything about buying the house to me, right? Is that so? Even if you asked me, I wouldn't know," I continued. My in-laws were murmuring to each other at my statement, noticing their commotion. "That's not important right now," my husband snapped. I continued explaining to him. To put it simply, your income wasn't enough to pass the credit check for buying a house. I was shocked that a 34-year-old only makes $25,000. At this, one of my brother-in-laws reacted, "What? No way, even I make $40,000. The youngest, Emma, who's 27, said that as my words caused a stir among the in-laws. My husband started to panic. "Don't say unnecessary things," he pleaded, sweat beginning to form on his forehead. "The truth is the truth, right? The moment you knew I was pregnant, you suggested abortion. Looking back, maybe I should have left you then." As I spoke, the in-laws looked more and more shocked. It seemed my husband hadn't told them anything. "Please stop this. You're reaping what you sowed." In contrast to my frantic husband, I was calm. I could see his face contorting. Then Tom asked, "So why are you selling the house?" "The income from Mike wasn't enough to pass the credit check for buying this house, so I decided to purchase it in full." "You earn that much?" My husband's voice was filled with surprise. "I have a good income due to my work. Unlike you, I don't squander money. I've always invested any spare cash in stocks. Now I can live off the profits and dividends alone." Hearing this, the entire family fell silent. I quickly assessed the situation. Since I was the one who bought the house, my husband and his family had no say. But my husband was not ready to give up. "Please don't sell it. Let's live together happily, okay?" He spoke to me with a strained expression. Seeing how pathetic he was, I firmly rejected him. "Don't be ridiculous. You left everything to others, and now you're acting as if you have a say in this. Keep your jokes to your personality. I won't forgive you for what you said about our baby. We're getting a divorce today." The word divorce clearly panicked my husband. All eyes of the in-laws were on him. Divorce? No, that can't be true. Why did you even think of living with your parents without consulting me? I finally voiced the question that had been bothering me. I wanted to do something filial for my parents. I thought it was something I could do. It was my father-in-law who reacted to my husband's statement. "Don't be ridiculous. It's not filial to take advantage of someone else's hard work and effort." "That's right. We came here half thinking you bought the house yourself, but this is just betrayal. My brother is the worst. I can't believe this." Surprisingly, my husband started getting attacked by his entire family before me. He was visibly shrinking in size. "Please stop this," he weakly pleaded. But everyone was clearly fed up with him. Then both of my in-laws turned to me and deeply apologized. "We're terribly sorry for our son's behavior. We'll leave quietly." "How when you can do as you please with him?" "Mom," my husband said weakly. "Be quiet," his mother sternly replied. His body trembled at her words. He looked like a male lion being expelled from the pride. There was no charm left in him, either as a man or as a husband. I then said, "You see now, right? You and I live in different worlds. Chase your own dreams alone. Goodbye. Let's discuss the rest legally, including child support." To him, after that, my husband slowly collapsed to his knees and remained motionless for a while. 2 days later, my husband and I signed the divorce papers. Next, we planned to discuss child support. Naturally, I got custody. My husband neither had the means nor the temperament to raise a child. Just the thought of handing my child over to such a self-centered man made my skin crawl. Then I returned to Anchorage again. I picked up my hospitalized child and went back to my parents' house. I could raise my child in peace here. Thankfully, my work is all online, so I'm not bound by location. Now I can live freely and comfortably. As for my ex-husband, after that day, he was disowned by his parents and now lives alone in seclusion. I still keep in touch with my former in-laws, so I hear about his situation. My ex-husband, who had no delicacy in his words, I naively thought he might change if I did. This experience taught me that people don't change that easily. However, better days are waiting for me now than when I was with my ex-husband. Of course, due to the presence of my newborn baby, I'm now a mother as well. I have to work hard at both my job and parenting. These thoughts were in my mind as I prepared to feed my baby for the first time.
You know, some days feel like they're smeared with gray from start to finish. Today, my 39th birthday, was exactly one of those. Waking up with the dull ache that's my faithful companion, I didn't feel much like celebrating. My name's Eliza, and I've been battling this damned illness since I was a kid. My condition's a tricky beast, keeping me tethered to a slew of doctors and this fancy private clinic I've been visiting since forever. Good thing I've made something of myself despite the odds, a thriving business that's all mine. But let's be honest, money's great, but it's no company on cold evenings. So there I was, back at the clinic for what felt like the millionth time, just to get myself checked and patched up, hoping to keep the beast at bay. And that's where I bumped into Jacob again. He's this nurse, you see, 5 years younger and looks like he stepped out of some glossy magazine, charming enough to make any woman look twice, sick or not. "Happy birthday, Eliza," Jacob greeted me with that grin that somehow knew more than it should. He was leaning casually against the nurse's station, looking like he didn't have a care in the world. "Thanks," I muttered, not really in the mood for chit-chat. I was more focused on getting through the day without any new bad news. Jacob seemed to pick up on my mood. He strolled over, all confidence and warm eyes. "Hey, don't look so glum. It's your birthday, isn't it? We should celebrate," he suggested, his voice smooth as silk. "Celebrate?" With more poking and prodding, I said, half joking but mostly serious. "Thanks, but I'd rather just get this over with." Jacob laughed, the sound easy and genuine. "Come on, Eliza. It's not every day you turn 39. Let me at least snag you a decent coffee from that cafe you like, my treat." Maybe it was the birthday blues or just the tiredness seeping into my bones, but I found myself nodding. "All right, Jacob. Coffee sounds good," I admitted, allowing a small smile to escape. We walked to the clinic's little cafe area, and as Jacob went off to order, I found a quiet corner to settle into. The thing about Jacob was that he always seemed genuinely cheerful, a stark contrast to the sterile whites and blues of the clinic. He'd been hitting on me since the first time I was admitted for an extended stay, always respectful but persistent as hell. Returning with 2 cups, Jacob handed one to me, his eyes never straying. "Eliza, you're one of the toughest people I know. This illness, it's part of you, but it ain't all of you. You've built a life, a business. That's not nothing." His words, blunt and simple, struck a chord. Maybe it was his straightforwardness, or maybe I was just vulnerable, but it felt good to be seen beyond the patient file. I chuckled, shaking my head slightly. "You always this optimistic?" "With you, always. You make it easy to believe in better days," he replied, his voice low and intimate. I don't know why I let my guard down. Maybe it was the birthday magic or Jacob's relentless charm, but as we sat there, talking and laughing over mediocre hospital cafe coffee, I felt lighter than I had in years. Discharged from the clinic and back in the swing of my daily routine, I thought the surprises were over. Then Jacob called. "Hey, Eliza, it's Jacob. How about dinner tonight? Just as friends, if you like." I hesitated, still riding the high of our last conversation. Sure, why not? I found myself saying, a little thrill of excitement making my stomach flutter. Jacob picked me up that evening, and he looked every bit the dashing nurse outside his scrubs, jeans, a crisp shirt, and that same disarming smile. As he drove us to a cozy little Italian place he knew, the air between us was charged, filled with the promise of something new. Over dinner, Jacob didn't waste any time. Between bites of spaghetti, he leaned in, his eyes serious. "Eliza, I've been thinking, why not give this a shot? You and me." I nearly choked on my pasta. "Jacob, you know my situation, my health. It's complicated. I can't have a normal relationship." Jacob reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "I don't care about that," he said firmly. "I love you for who you are, not for what you can or can't do. Plus, you deserve to be happy. Everyone does." His words were a balm, soothing the fears that always lurked in the back of my mind. How could I not be moved? "Okay, let's give it a try," I agreed, feeling a mixture of joy and terror. Dating Jacob was like a breath of fresh air. He made everything fun, even a simple walk in the park felt like an adventure. He had this knack for making me laugh, and for the first time in a long while, I forgot about my illness. I was just Eliza, not Eliza with a chronic condition. 6 months flew by in a blur of happiness, and then, out of the blue, Jacob proposed. We were at home, a simple night in, when he got down on one knee with a small, elegant ring. "Marry me, Eliza. Let's make this official." Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded vigorously. "Yes, Jacob. Yes." But practicality kicked in soon after, and I knew we had to sort out some legal stuff first. "Jacob, I want a prenup. It's important to me," I told him one evening, my voice steady despite the fluttering in my chest. Jacob didn't blink an eye. "Whatever you need to feel secure, I'm on board." Jacob signed the document without another word, his signature swift and sure. Our wedding was modest, held at the city hall with just a handful of friends as witnesses. Afterward, we moved into my plush apartment in the city center. For the first time in my life, I felt truly at ease, truly loved. And in those moments, my illness and its shadows seemed very far away indeed. Life as a newlywed started off better than I could have imagined. Jacob and I were settling into our daily routines, and I felt like I was living in a dream. That was until a few months after the wedding when Jacob dropped a bombshell after a particularly quiet dinner. "Eliza, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I've decided to quit my job," Jacob said abruptly, his tone serious as he avoided my gaze. I almost dropped my fork. "Quit your job? Why all of a sudden?" "You love nursing," I responded, trying to keep the surprise out of my voice. Jacob sighed, pushing his plate away. "I'm tired, Eliza. Tired of dealing with sickness every day. It's draining, you know." He looked up at me, his eyes searching for understanding. I reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "I get it, love. But what will you do?" He smiled then, a slow spread across his face. "I was thinking I could take care of the house, cook for us, make things nice here, Wouldn't that be something? I paused, considering. It wasn't a typical arrangement, sure, but Jacob's cooking was divine, and he had a knack for making our place look like it belonged in a magazine. If that's what you want, I'm all for it, I finally said, giving his idea my blessing. True to his word, Jacob transformed into the perfect homemaker. Each evening I came home to a spotless apartment and the aroma of something delicious wafting through the air. Dinners were elaborate affairs, and Jacob always made sure to dress up the table like we were dining at a five-star restaurant. I felt pampered, cherished, like a goddess. "Darling, you've outdone yourself again," I exclaimed one night as I took a bite of the exquisite beef bourguignon he had prepared. Jacob, beaming with pride, filled my wine glass. "Only the best for my best girl," he replied, winking at me across the table. This bliss, however, gradually started to fade. A year into our marriage, I noticed a shift. Jacob began spending more and more time in his office, his excuses ready whenever I asked. "Just sorting some bills, or planning something special for us," he would say. I tried to shake the nagging feeling that something was off. The apartment was still immaculate, the dinners still delicious, but the man who used to sit and chat with me for hours was slowly retreating behind a closed door. One evening, unable to shake my sense of unease, I confronted him. "Jacob, we need to talk. You've been so distant lately. Is everything okay?" He looked up from his computer, surprised. "Everything's fine, Eliza. You're imagining things," he reassured me, his voice gentle yet dismissive. "But you're always locked away in here. We hardly talk anymore. Don't you miss how things used to be?" I pressed, feeling the frustration rise. Jacob stood and came over to where I was sitting, his hands on my shoulders. "Eliza, I love you. Nothing's changed. I'm just managing some stuff to keep our lives running smoothly. Trust me, okay?" I wanted to believe him, to brush off the doubts and fall into his reassurance. "Okay, I trust you," I murmured, though the pit in my stomach told me not to dismiss my feelings so quickly. It was supposed to be a surprise. I planned to leave work early, cook dinner for Jacob, and maybe rekindle some of that old spark. I was practically buzzing as I turned my key in the lock, ready for a quiet evening with my husband. What I wasn't ready for was the scene that greeted me. In the kitchen, a middle-aged woman, whom I had never seen before, was bustling around, chopping vegetables and stirring pots. My heart sank. "Excuse me, who are you?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. The woman turned, a look of confusion crossing her face. "Oh, you must be Mrs. Eliza. I'm Helen. I've been cooking and cleaning here for over a year now," she said, as if that explained everything. "A year?" My voice cracked. "And who hired you?" "Your husband, madam. He said it would ease your burdens," Helen replied, returning her focus to the bubbling pot on the stove. I felt like the floor was slipping away under me. "Thank you, Helen. That will be all for today. I'll handle it from here," I managed to say, keeping my tone even. Once Helen left, the silence of the apartment pounded in my ears. I sat down, trying to process everything. Where was Jacob if not here taking care of things as he claimed? The next day, I contacted a private detective. It was something out of a TV show, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I needed to know what Jacob was doing. The detective's report came back faster than I expected. Jacob had been gambling, not just casual poker nights with friends, but high-stakes games at a casino downtown. He was in debt, big time. When I confronted him that evening, he didn't even try to deny it. His face crumpled when he saw the detective's photos and reports scattered across the coffee table. "Eliza, I can explain," Jacob stammered, his eyes not meeting mine. "Explain, Jacob, you waste our money." My voice rose, a mix of anger and heartbreak. Jacob's shoulders slumped. I know it's bad. I started going to the casino just to blow off some steam. But it got out of hand. I'm so sorry, Eliza." "Sorry doesn't fix this, Jacob." I was trying to stay calm, but the betrayal stung deep. "You have debts because of your gambling. How much are we talking about?" He hesitated, then mumbled, 70,000. There was a long, heavy pause. Then, I made up my mind. I will pay off your debts this one time. But under 2 conditions: you seek treatment for your gambling addiction, and you sign a receipt acknowledging that I have paid this debt. "Treatment, yes, I'll do it. Anything you say. And I'll sign whatever you need me to," Jacob rushed the words out, relief fleeting across his face. I arranged everything quickly. The debt was cleared, and Jacob started his therapy. He signed the receipt, his hand shaking slightly as he put pen to paper. A whole year had ticked by since I'd bailed Jacob out of his gambling debts and watched him walk into that rehab center. He'd come back seemingly changed, dedicated to our fresh start, or so I thought. That illusion shattered the day I came home to find not just Jacob, but his sister Linda and her 3 kids surrounded by suitcases and boxes in my living room. "What's all this?" I asked, my tone icy as I dropped my keys and bag on the hall table, taking in the chaotic scene. Linda, who had the nerve to look right at home, smirked as she straightened up from unpacking a box. "Oh, Eliza, we're moving in." Jacob said it's fine, since it's his apartment now. My head snapped towards Jacob, who was leaning against the wall with an all-too-familiar smug look on his face. "What is she talking about, Jacob?" Jacob pushed off from the wall and sauntered over with an impudent grin. "Exactly what she said. I've had enough, Eliza. You've been riding my back for years, making me your servant. It's time I took what's mine." I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Your servant? Are you out of your mind?" "I've supported you, paid your debts." Linda piped up again, her voice sharp. "And that just proves it. You've kept him under your thumb, paying to keep him tied to you." Jacob nodded vigorously as he pulled a stack of papers from behind a cushion on the sofa. "I've filed for divorce, and I'll be seeking compensation for years of mistreatment and alimony, since I've been the one stuck at home." The absurdity of his words stung. I looked around at the home I had built, at the faces of his nieces and nephews who looked confused and tired. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a coup. I realized then that any response would be futile. Jacob had made up his mind, egged on by Linda's greedy ambitions. Instead of the explosive reaction they expected, I turned, my movements calm and deliberate, and went to our bedroom to pack a bag. Jacob called after me, his voice laced with false concern. "Where do you think you're going, Eliza?" I didn't look back as I zipped my suitcase. "I'm leaving. My lawyer will be in touch with you. Discuss any further matters with him." As I walked out of the bedroom, suitcase in hand, I could hear Linda's snide whisper. "Well, that was easier than I thought." Jacob laughed, a sound that once would have warmed my heart. Now it chilled me to the bone. "Yeah, she knows when she's beaten." I could hear their triumphant laughter as I descended in the elevator, but it was hollow. The night air was cool and liberating, and as I hailed a taxi, a small, knowing smile played on my lips. Jacob thought he had won, played his hand perfectly, but he was clueless about the ace I had up my sleeve. I directed the taxi to my house in the elite cottage settlement, an hour's drive away and a world apart from the city's chaos. This house was my sanctuary, unknown to Jacob. Years ago, when my business first flourished, I invested in this property, thinking of my long-term health needs. It nestled within a village that boasted of a specialized clinic for my condition. I had always planned to move here permanently someday, perhaps when I grew older, or if my health declined further, but with Jacob's betrayal, that day had come sooner than expected. As the taxi rolled through the secure gates, the familiar sight of lush gardens and manicured paths brought a sense of peace. The house stood majestic and inviting, a testament to the life I had built independently of any man. Unpacking didn't take long. I had brought only essentials, knowing everything else I needed was already here. Sinking into an armchair, I exhaled deeply, truly relaxed for the first time in months. The peace was short-lived, however. A few days later, my phone buzzed, a call from Jacob, his voice frantic and angry. "Eliza, you set me up. What's this nonsense about paying rent?" I couldn't help but smile at his outrage. "Calm down, Jacob. Why don't you come over and we can talk about it? I'll text you the address." The next morning, I watched from my front porch as a car pulled up. Jacob and Linda stepped out, their eyes wide as they took in the expanse of my property. The shock on their faces was almost comical. "What is this place? How do you have a house like this?" Jacob blurted out as they approached. I stood, crossing my arms. "Welcome to my home, Jacob. This is where I've planned to retire. You never asked, so I never mentioned it." Linda, ever the instigator, nudged Jacob. "She's been hiding all this from you, and she made you live in that tiny apartment? Jacob's confusion turned to anger. You tricked me, Eliza. And now your lawyer tells me I owe rent for an apartment that's been sold? I spent years taking care of that place. That apartment was a rental controlled through my company, Jacob. You didn't think to ask about the details, did you? And yes, it's been sold. The rent's due next month, I explained nonchalantly. Linda piped up, her voice dripping with greed. We want this house, Eliza. If we have to leave the apartment, you should give us this house. Jacob nodded, a desperate look on his face. Yeah, if you don't, we'll sue. We'll take this to court. I burst out laughing, the sound echoing off the high ceilings. Oh, you will you? This house was bought before I met you, Jacob. It's protected, outside the reach of your claims. Their faces fell, the realization that they had no legal ground to stand on sinking in. As they continued to protest, I made a simple gesture to the security personnel who had discreetly gathered nearby. Within moments, Jacob and Linda were escorted off the property, their shouts fading into the distance. The courtroom was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the heated emotions running high within its walls. Jacob had filed a lawsuit claiming that I had exploited him, reducing him to little more than a slave in our home. The audacity of it made my blood boil, but I maintained my composure, trusting in the stack of evidence my lawyer had organized. Jacob took the stand, his voice shaky but determined. Every day was the same. I cleaned, I cooked, I did everything around that apartment while Eliza just took it all for granted. She treated me like I was less than nothing, he declared, throwing a resentful glance my way. Linda was next, her testimony dripping with exaggeration. My brother was completely under her thumb. She was cruel, always belittling him. I saw it myself. She's a tyrant. My lawyer, calm and precise, called our first witness, Helen, the real person who had been managing our household chores while Jacob purportedly played the downtrodden husband. Can you tell the court your relationship to the defendant? My lawyer asked. I was hired by Mr. Jacob to clean their apartment and cook. He paid me from a separate account, which he funded, Helen explained, her voice clear and unwavering. And how often did Mrs. Eliza interact with you in these matters? Never. She didn't even know I existed until the day she found me in their apartment, Helen replied, casting a sympathetic glance my way. The courtroom buzzed, the judge noting the reactions. Jacob's face had gone white, his sister's mouth agape. My lawyer then presented the prenuptial agreement, the document displayed for all to see. This agreement, signed by both parties, clearly states that in the event of a divorce, Mr. Jacob is entitled to nothing. No alimony, no compensation. Would you confirm, Mr. Jacob, that this is your signature? Jacob, now visibly sweating, nodded weakly. Yes, but I didn't. You didn't read it? My lawyer cut in sharply. Yet you signed it, correct? Yes, Jacob admitted, his voice barely a whisper. The judge made a note, his expression unreadable. As the final blow, I had instructed my lawyer to bring up the payment I made to clear Jacob's gambling debts. The signed receipt was shown, proving his financial irresponsibility and my attempts to save our financial stability. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was firm. After reviewing the evidence and testimonies, it is clear that Mr. Jacob's claims are unfounded. The court denies the claim for compensation and alimony. Furthermore, the prenuptial agreement stands as legally binding. The divorce is granted. Jacob slumped, defeated, while Linda's face contorted with rage. You idiot, she hissed at him outside the courtroom. You screwed up everything. We had a perfect setup, and you couldn't even play your part right. As they bickered, I walked away from the courthouse, a weight lifted off my shoulders. Jacob had been planning to live off me, thinking he could outsmart me. His greed was his undoing, and now he was left with nothing but his own failures to contemplate. Life had a funny way of coming full circle, and as I sat in my sunlit living room overlooking the gardens of my secure, serene village home, I couldn't help but reflect on the whirlwind that had been my life over the past few years. My business was thriving, managed efficiently by my assistant, and my health was stable, monitored closely by the excellent clinic just down the road. I was finally at peace, or so I thought, until Jacob showed up again, uninvited and unwelcome, disrupting my tranquility. It was a crisp morning when I saw him at the gates through the security camera, looking disheveled and desperate. I had instructed the guards never to let him in, but somehow he had talked his way up to the front door. As I opened it, he fell to his knees, an act so dramatic it would have been comical if it weren't so pathetic. "Eliza, please, you have to take me back," Jacob pleaded, his voice cracking. "I'll do anything. I'll cook, clean, whatever you want. Just let me stay here." I stared down at him, my disgust mounting by the second. "Get up, Jacob. You're making a scene," I said, my voice icy. "It's all Linda's fault. She talked me into everything, the divorce, the claims. I never wanted any of it." His words tumbled out in a rush, a sloppy attempt at excusing his actions. I crossed my arms, feeling the anger bubble inside me. "You expect me to believe that? After everything, you think you can just blame Linda and I'll forgive you?" Jacob's eyes were pleading, but behind them, I could still see the same selfishness. "Eliza, I'm broke. I've had to take out a massive loan to pay you back that $70,000, and now I'm struggling. I can't survive out there." "Should have thought of that before you tried to cheat me out of everything I've worked for," I snapped back. His hardships were of his own making. His current state was not my responsibility. Realizing his groveling was getting him nowhere, Jacob's tone shifted, edged with desperation. "Eliza, I need this. Please." I shook my head, resolute. "You need to leave, Jacob. Now." When he hesitated, I turned and signaled to the security standing by. They promptly stepped forward, each taking an arm, and lifted Jacob off the ground. "No, Eliza, please, Enough, Jacob. You've made your bed. Now lie in it." I interrupted him firmly, my patience worn thin. As the guards escorted him away, I instructed them to ensure he would never be allowed on the premises again. Turning back to my home, I felt a surge of relief mixed with sadness. Sadness for the man I thought I had married, and relief that I was now truly free of him. I had dreams to chase and a life to live that was not defined by the deceit of a failed marriage. My home was my sanctuary, tailored to my needs and filled with peace. I planned to travel, see the world in ways I never had before, and meet people who shared my passions and integrity. As I looked out over the lush greenery that bordered my home, I felt a sense of excitement for the future. The world was wide and full of possibilities, and I was ready to explore it on my own terms, with my head held high and my heart open to new adventures. Jacob was a chapter closed, a lesson learned in trust and resilience. Now, it was time for new stories to begin.